Well, on Friday, we learned the Senate Intelligence Committee is investigating Russia's involvement in the 2016 election.
Joining us now from Washington is New York Times Magazine chief national correspondent and CBS News contributor Mark Leibovich. Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Are you surprised that this investigation is happening?
In the micro, a little bit, because Richard Burr, who's the chairman of the committee, basically reversed himself from what he said about 24 hours ago, which is that he thought that this was more of an FBI matter. Today, in sort of a joint statement with Mark Warner, who's his Democratic counterpart on the committee, they said that they would look into it. So I think that this actually is a pretty significant signal of the momentum that there might be to look into this on the Senate. I think Republicans in the Senate have shown pretty consistently, especially this week, that they are going to probably be the hardest line and maybe the sort of the stiffest oversight of this Russia matter, and probably a thorn in Donald Trump's side as he tries to, as he gets his administration off the ground.
Mark, let's talk about something else that happened today. On Friday, House Republicans joined their Senate colleagues in voting for a measure that will make it easier for them to repeal Obamacare. The question is, the president-elect said in that press conference that he was looking to do something, a repeal and a replacement very, very quickly. Doesn't sound like a lot of Republicans are on the very, very quickly side of the aisle. Where does it go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing today is largely a procedural measure that will actually enable this to happen going forward. I mean, I think that's not insignificant. I think the crux of this is going to be in the details, which is how do you replace something like this? It's clear that the Republicans don't have a plan ready right now, and what is the time frame? So what this does is essentially just opens the door, and then really the nitty gritty of the details and the time frame will go forward. But this is significant as far as a procedural step.
During his confirmation hearings this week, retired General James Mattis said some things in direct contrast with the president-elect, actually during his hearing, calling NATO, and I quote here, the most successful military alliance probably in modern world history, maybe ever. And he's not the only cabinet pick here who has deviated, so to speak, from the president-elect during their confirmation hearings. What do you think about this distancing?
Well, I don't know if it's distancy or if it's just basic disagreement. I mean, Trump this morning I think it was a tweet, I sort of lose track of how he communicates, but I think this was a tweet. He made sort of a blanket, absolution to anyone, saying, look, I don't want them to parrot my views. I want them to parrot their own views. And I mean, to me, that was a pretty, sort of a blanket permission slip for them to sort of speak on their own. And I think the implicit undercurrent to that is that he is going to be the one setting policy, and we will see if the two of them, if him and his cabinet people can actually get their heads together on this. But I don't think he seemed terribly concerned about it. But I think obviously it's going to make for some debates going forward.
Yeah, but Mark, I guess the question is, so clearly in our democracy, we have these three branches of government. They're meant to serve as a check on each other. But if you have the president-elect on the campaign trail saying, for example, that he's going to have a deportation force, and then you have the Speaker of the House saying, well, no, that's not really going to be the case. You're not going to have people showing up at your door to take you back, to take you away if you have been living a good life, you haven't committed any crimes, etc. You have Mike Pompeo, who has been picked to head the CIA, saying he does not agree with waterboarding and with torture. So it's not just a disagreement. It sounds like as if they don't even buy into what the president-elect has said. The question I guess I have for you is it possible then that these nominees and ultimately the Congress will be able to serve as a check on the president should he try to implement those policies that he touted on the campaign trail?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, in a sense, the cabinet itself could be a branch of government sort of within the executive branch, although that doesn't usually work very smoothly. I mean, right now it's essentially not a philosophical discussion, but they're talking. There might come a time very, very soon where it falls upon a Secretary Mattis or Secretary Designate Mattis, Mike Pompeo, to actually enforce these policies that Donald Trump campaigned on, whether it's waterboarding, whether it's something relating to Russia, whether it's something related to NATO. And that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, I think where you have a real oversight opportunity is, will someone like, say, James Mattis, would he actually resign over something like this? And, obviously there's been a fairly, especially with Mattis, there's been a fairly wide range of disagreements so far. So, I mean, we'll see how that actually works in the execution. But obviously, defense is a vitally important part of the administration, and that's the kind of thing where debate would play out pretty tensely.
So, Mark, are we looking at potentially a team of rivals situation here on the cabinet with the president, or do you expect that they will more or less be in lockstep with the president-elect, except perhaps on some matters where they disagree with him on?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. I mean, I think right now the rivalries or the potential rivalries we're talking about are with Donald Trump himself and the cabinet people. I mean, I don't really see any real signs of tension between any of these nominees among themselves. I mean, obviously, some of them are going to have a harder line on, say, torture or Russia or something. But yeah, I mean, I think a team of rivals is. I mean, I think in the original construction. And it was a book by Doris Kearns Goodman. It was about rivals, within a cabinet. It was people against each other, and you had a president sort of watching these arguments play out and then making a decision. Here, I mean, it's unclear, where the rivalries will be, but there's always going to be some in an administration, and I think this will be no different.
What we do know is that there will be 8 more cabinet confirmation hearings next week, and some of those hearings could be more controversial than the ones that we had this week. Can't really say for sure, but it's a possibility. Right. Which one is on your radar?
Well, I mean, I think next week, I think Tom Price, obviously, the incoming head of Health and Human Services, I think there'll be a lot of questions about ACA, which is obviously a very, very hot button issue right now. I mean, I think so far, if you look back on this week, probably the Tillerson hearings got the most headlines, especially there was a lot of pointed questions, especially from a lot of Republican senators, Marco Rubio among them. But so going forward, you sort of don't know where it's going to be. I mean, I think Betsy DeVos, the incoming education secretary designate, there'll be some pointed things there. But you don't know where the fireworks are going to erupt. But look, it's pretty packed. What's interesting from a news cycle standpoint is it's sort of hard to focus on anything because more keeps coming up. So we'll see. I mean, I do think that Senator Burr's announcement today about them looking into Russia is going to ensure that that's certainly going to be part of the conversation for the next few weeks, even through the inauguration.
And Mark, finally, Politico is reporting that only a handful of Democrats are expecting to not attend the inauguration. In other words, most Democrats will be at the inauguration on Friday. Should Americans take heart in the fact that what we're witnessing is that peaceful transition of power between one president to another, or are you surprised by that?
Well, I mean, I think at bare minimum, it looks like there will be a peaceful transfer of power. But look, this is a pretty divided country right now, and I think Donald Trump's the sort of disapproval ratings he's gotten for his transition, the numbers he has coming in. And also just the very, very lingering divisions left over from the election and the environment that we had coming in indicates that this is going to be a very, very, very tense period. I don't know, the inauguration will be like a fascinating pageant to watch. I mean, not just for who shows up. I mean, I think really the big guests would be, Bill and Hillary Clinton. The Bushes have said or George W. Bush said he's going to be there. So I think sort of the big former presidents, Jimmy Carter said he'd be there, are sort of, they're going to be in place. But yeah, clearly there'll be some protests. I think a lot of the tenor of President-elect Trump's speech will be studied very closely. And I don't think that there's going to be anything that we see on Thursday that's going to make this country seem more or less divided than it is right now. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of work to do as far as healing the divisions of the election, and we'll see if Donald Trump is willing to do that.
All right, Mark. Well, we know you made an extra effort to get to our D.C. bureau there. We appreciate it.
And bringing CBSN together. Thank you, guys.
You are.
Thanks,
Have a good
Mark.
weekend.
You too.
You too.
Okay.